Hello my loves, my name is Hannah and welcome to a new reading vlog on my channel. It is August at the moment, which means it's Women in Translation Month, and we're actually like 2/3 of the way through August and I've only read one translated book so far this month. So I thought, sugar, need to get that back up. And I also have been neglecting the Storygraph Read the World challenge. I did say I was going to vlog for every book I read for each of the 10 prompts of that, and I'm behind. So I thought, right, let's do some translated fiction and try and hit one of the Read the World prompts, which you will know from the thumbnail of this video is Italy. We are going to Italy. We are reading My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. Now, Elena Ferrante, I have never read any of her work before. I have seen a film adaptation of one of her books, not this one. The one with Olivia Colman in, something about a daughter, which I thought was fine. Elena Ferrante I'm very interested in. This is a pseudonym. And nobody knows who Elena Ferrante is. And lots of people keep trying to find out, which annoys me a little bit, if I'm honest. But yeah, I'm interested. But I have also heard from quite a few people recently have DNF'd this book, which makes me a little nervous. I know Simon over at Savage Reads DNF'd it in one of his reading blogs a couple of months ago. I know Ariel from the Books Unbound podcast DNF'd it a while ago. So I'm a little bit trepidatious. However, let's see how it goes. I know very little about it, except that it's about the friendship between two women. And it is the first in the Neapolitan series. So at this point, I don't know much. You might know more than me, but I'm going to start reading it now, and I will check in with you when I have read it. Oh my God, it's got an index of characters. Thank Christ. If you're new here, there is a reason my handle is Hannah Lost the Plot. I'm not very good with remembering, just kind of extraneous details like character names. So, I personally always find it helpful to have a little character list. This edition is translated by Anne Goldstein, who translates all of Elena Ferrante's books into English. So yay. There we go. That's all I have to say so far. I will check in with you soon. Maybe I will try and make some Neapolitan ice cream. That's not going to happen. I'm predicting right now that that doesn't happen. Let's see. I've lost the camera. Hi. Good morning. For you, no time will have passed, but for me, it's been a little while. It's been a little while since I filmed that intro clip, which perhaps might indicate where I'm at with the book. So that sounds more ominous than I mean, but I did start reading My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, and we will talk about it. I'm not hating it, but I haven't read that much of it, mostly because, as I think I've mentioned, but maybe not in this video, but on my channel, I'm reading the Booker Prize long list at the minute, or at least I'm trying to, but I am using my library to do that, which means I don't have much control over when my holds and reserves come in, and a lot of Booker Prize books came in all in one go, some of them with 2 or 3 week loans on them, so I've just had to prioritize reading those because technically I can read this whenever. But also, it's, oh my goodness, it's so bright. Is that better? Is that better? But yeah, also it's just not been, it's an interesting book. It's an interesting book because I'm enjoying it when I pick it up, but I've had a few of these recently. I don't know if it's the books or me, it could be me. I'm like enjoying it when I'm reading it, but it doesn't play on my mind at all when I'm not literally reading it, and therefore I don't pick it up very often. I've also just been in a bit of it's nearly the start of the new academic year, because yes, it's September now, which means I have not read this book for Women in Translation Month. Whoops. It's nearly the start of the new term, and I always get a bit like, I work in education, so September's always busy and stressful, and I think my body has just needed like to binge watch some TV and stuff. So I've been listening to it and been doing that. So I'm going to persevere with the book, and I will talk to you about it in a second, I swear. But the context is, I've not been doing brilliant reading in the last couple of weeks, or at least not been doing brilliant reading of this. So what's the book about? It is essentially, as the name might suggest, it's about friendship, sort of. So it is about 2 women, one called Elena and one called Lena, in Italy. And the book opens with Elena, who the book is told from her perspective, it's first person narration. And she gets a call from Lena's grown adult son saying that his mum has disappeared. She's just like evaporated, basically. She's just completely disappeared. And that happens right at the start. And Elena, instead of being worried, is pissed off. Let me read you a little bit. So she says, Leela is overdoing it, as usual, I thought. She was expanding the concept of trace out of all of proportion. She wanted not only to disappear herself now at the age of 66, but also to eliminate the entire life that she had left behind. I was really angry. We'll see who wins this time, I said to myself. I turned on the computer and began to write all the details of our story, everything that still remained in my memory. So this book is sort of an act of revenge and rebellion against this sort of disappearing act that one friend has made. And the book is that. It is, as she said, everything that she can remember. And I think the reason I'm a bit apprehensive about this book is that this is a quartet of books. So I could be wrong, but I think you have to read all 4 books to know what actually happens to Lena. And I don't know if I've got that in me. I don't know if I've got it in me. But we'll see, we'll persevere. So it basically, Elena starts, she goes back to the beginning from when they were children, when they first met. And it is the story of their friendship. Now, because it is a recollection, and this has happened a lot, there's a lot of recollecty books on the Booker Prize list this year. And I do like them, but they are not without their challenges. And this one, there is a lot of, Elena will like have one anecdote, and then like we'll loop back because there was another anecdote that sort of overlapped with that, and then it becomes, I'm getting a bit lost in terms of like where I am in the timeline, because she's telling sequentially things that happened
concurrently, and I'm getting a little confused by that. And the friendship, as you might expect from the sort of sourness in that opening prologue, even though it's called My Brilliant Friend, that is definitely said with sarcasm. So Lena and Elena have quite a competitive friendship. Elena is definitely like enamored of Lena, but basically Elena was the smartest one in class, and then Lena joins and she doesn't even need to try, she's just brilliant. And it really annoys Elena and it really damages her sense of self-worth, and so she befriends her, and they have this quite, even from a very young age, quite a toxic friendship, which is sort of like not what I wanted from a book that I thought was going to be a book about female friendship, because it's a bit like, oh, that's depressing. But you know, there's places for it to go. It is reminding me quite a lot of The Book of Goose by Ian Lee. There's kind of similar things being explored in that there is Lena is definitely the effervescent Gatsby type friend, with Elena being the more steady Eddie of the group. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how many hundreds of pages I want to read about two women who don't really like each other and feel like they're in competition with each other. But also, I'm 100 pages in, so that's about a third of the book. And what I am liking is the sort of surrounding world and some of the nuance and some of the political and social commentary that's going on, because I think where we've gone back to in time is like the 40s-ish in like rural Italy, and that's not a time period that I'm very familiar with, but she does do a really brilliant job of sort of painting that world. Let me read you a couple of bits and bobs. So we lived in a world in which children and adults were often wounded, blood flowed from the wounds, they festered, and sometimes people died. Our world was like that, full of words that killed: croup, tetanus, typhus, gas, war, lathe, rubble, work, bombardment, bomb, tuberculosis, infection. Yeah, and I think there's a few more bits in. Yeah, I feel no nostalgia for our childhood. It was full of violence. And so there's that kind of playing on in the background. And I think what you're going to get if you follow the 4 books through in their entirety is a really interesting social history of Italy happening in the background. I just at the moment am unsure how committed I am to these characters. So that's where we're at. Writing's good. It's like I said, when I do pick it up and I read it, I like the writing of it. I'm having some problems with the characters and their relationship, and I'm having some problems with the structure. But yeah. Let's see where it heads. I am making some breakfast now. It is a Saturday, and then I'm going to go and sit in the park with my friends this afternoon and have a chilled time, and I'm going to bring my book and hopefully we'll read a little bit more of it. It's really interesting as well because I just started listening to Elizabeth Day's book, Friendaholic, which is non-fiction about Elizabeth's kind of relationship with friendship and how her understanding of it has changed. So it's actually a really interesting book to be listening to in tandem to this, because you're just like, oh, toxic little friendship brewing between these girlies. But hey ho, catch you later.
It has been nearly a week since I last checked in with you. I still haven't finished reading this book. It's turning into a bit of a slog, but like I said before, it's not. I don't think I can lay that at the book's door, you know. I just think I've bitten off a little bit more than I can chew with this book of stuff, and you know, it was the first week of a new academic year this week, so I haven't had tons of time for reading. But here's the thing, I'm still in this place where I don't know how I feel about this book. A few things, because I just rewatched. It's been that long that I had to rewatch what I filmed last Saturday because I couldn't even remember what I'd spoken to you about. I said rural. It's not rural. Shock horror. The Neapolitan quartet is set in Naples. But it's like their little... I think the reason I thought rural is that it does feel quite rural in the sense that their community is incredibly insular and very, very protected. There's this scene where when they're kind of early teenagers, they go into the city and go out of what they call the neighborhood where they live. And it seems like actually the center of Naples is not very far away from where they live, but for whatever reason, they're very siloed in their community. And what we're getting as the book progresses, and it is sort of split into like their periods of their life. So you have kind of like early childhood, and now the vast majority of the book is sort of their adolescence. And we are getting the sense that Elena and Lena, people call her Lena, but then Elena calls her Lila, and it's lots of similar sounding like syllables. Poor me. But Lila and Elena are both trying to explore their options for getting out of the situation that they're in. Their community is incredibly working class. There are not a lot of opportunities for girls. Elena's family are slightly more supportive of an academic career than Lila's are. Lila's family are shoemakers, and Lila is sort of, the dad is basically like, why the fuck would you go to middle school? We need you to be earning money. And Lila, for a while, Lila is, remember, the one who is incredibly academically gifted. Like Elena works hard, but Lila has this like natural appetite and intellect. She's incredibly smart. She teaches herself a lot of stuff. She taught herself Italian, she taught herself Latin, because they speak like a Napoli dialect. So there are scenes in the book where Ferrante makes it clear that they're speaking Italian now versus when they're speaking in dialect. And yeah, so Lila's really, really bright, but her family don't support this sort of academic route for her. Her and her brother, for a while, harbour this sort of ambition that they are going to design these like brand new kind of shoes. And they do it kind of like behind the dad's back, and they have this like, right, we're going to design these like amazing like new shoes that like no one has, and eventually we're going to have this like family factory, and we're not going to make our shoes by hand anymore. We're going to have this whole factory, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to make money, we're going to be successful. Elena doesn't really have a sort of plan, but her parents at least are allowing her / being strong-armed by her teacher into keeping her in education. And we're just now also getting this idea that actually, and probably more realistically, a potential route out of their current situation is marriage. Now they're only 14 and Lila's just been proposed to, and her dad is sort of pushing her in that direction. So I think it, as I sort of said in the last clip, the stuff that's really interesting me is all of the social stuff that's going on in the background. and what that's uncovering about Naples at this time, and opportunities for women, and like particularly working class women and young girls, and all of the frustrations and barriers and challenges that they are encountering. I just still don't really get what the plot is, or what the narrative is. But interestingly, you know how in the last clip I said I was listening to Elizabeth Day's book? She mentions the Neapolitan quartet, and she loves them as a kind of long-term view of like a history of a female friendship. So I'm sort of thinking, well, if I approach it like that, like a documentary rather than a, sorry if you can hear the sirens, like a documentary rather than a story, then maybe that makes more sense to me. Because at the moment, I think the reason I feel like I can just not pick it up is because I don't really know what questions the book is asking me that are going to be answered in this volume. I think I was wrong in the last clip when I said we'll find out what happens, you know, do we have to read 4 books to find out what happens to Leela? I don't think we're ever going to find out what happens to Leela and why she disappears. I think all that Ferrantes is going to tell us in the 4 books is the history of these 2 women's lives. Well, really the history of Leela's life as remembered by Elena. And we're never going to know what happens to Leela, is my suspicion, which I'm sort of okay with, but it does make me a bit defeatist about investigating what is in the book, because I feel like I'm not going to get answers. I think I'm going to be shown context, which is not the same as being given answers. And I don't mind working and digging around in a book and investigating. But I do think it's a challenging read, not because it's difficult to read, but because she's not interested in presenting you with a straightforward story, and that is okay. That is okay. But I am going to try this evening. I don't know if I'll finish it, but I'm going to try and get a good chunk in. I think that's also part of the problem, is that I've just been reading it quite piecemeal. And because the structure of the story is quite anecdotal and like episodic anyway, I think I'm just really I think I know in my head, or I can predict what the arc of the series is, but for me at the moment, it doesn't feel like this book has an arc. I feel a bit like I'm just sort of meandering along. Maybe that sounds really harsh. I don't know. But I almost just, it is making me want to watch a documentary about Naples and like the social history of Naples. There's sort of links, like vague links to like mentions of the rise of fascism. Obviously, this is kind of like just post-war, and also some kind of like hints of like organized crime and stuff, which I think will become maybe more involved, like will become more prevalent maybe as the characters mature and as the books progress. But at the minute, I don't really know what I'm reading. I'm gonna be like, if you've read this series or even this book, please let me know your thoughts, because I'm not hating it. I don't know if I like it. I'm confused. Let's read some more and see if we can find clarity. Hey, peace. It's editing, Hannah. Proof. I just wanted to very briefly introduce the B-roll that you're going to see next, because out of context it might look a bit odd. Farmer and I went to a cat cafe. Here are some cats. Enjoy. Hi. So, it turns out that giving this book a really big chunk of time last night was exactly what this book needed. And I ended up enjoying it a lot more for it. I read like most of what I had left last night, and then I had about 40 pages that I finished off this morning, and I definitely have a clearer understanding of what the book was going for, and I'm feeling a lot more charitable towards it. Not even charitable. That's kind of like condescending of me. But you know what I mean. I'm just feeling a bit more positive about it. I think it did really benefit from having that more concentrated reading time. I'm gonna put it down now. It benefited from having that more concentrated reading time, I think. Partly for two reasons. Partly just it helped me get into the flow of it a lot more, but also I think as the novel progressed, and the characters aged up a little bit, they're kind of 16, 17 at the end of the novel, the narrative does become much more cohesive. And I guess that's not surprising, right? Because remember that this book is kind of much older Elena's recollection of her relationship with Leela, and so it isn't surprising that the earlier childhood stuff is maybe a little bit more fragmented and a little bit more scattered. And then as she kind of gets older, things become much more fluent in her memory. I do still think it is unfortunate. I know a lot of people have DNF'd this book, and I do think it gets much better as you go on. I can see why the first kind of half of the book is written the way that it is, but I mean, as you know from watching this video, I was really struggling with it at one point. But rest assured, if you are interested in it, it does become a more harmonious reading experience as you go on. I've made a lot of notes because a lot of thoughts as I was reading yesterday and this morning, and I think with the characters of Elena and Lena, that was what I was getting really concerned with, was that they had this kind of toxic relationship that just felt quite like, you know, a little bit anti-feminist, if I'm honest. But I do think as the book progressed, they don't necessarily become more likable as characters, but they do become a lot more nuanced, and I did feel a lot more empathy for both of them as the book progressed. As I think I said in the last clip, there is this sense in both of the characters that all of their actions are to do with them sort of trying to get out of the circumstances that they find themselves in, and they have slightly different approaches to that. I think you can almost think of them as being like a tension between getting out and getting up. So for Lena, her ambition is not necessarily to leave the neighborhood. She just wants to be of a better standing within the neighborhood. The extent of her ambition is sort of to get her family in a place where they are settled and a bit more in the sort of striving towards the middle classes, and to be settled and to not be struggling. But she doesn't really feel a need to leave where she is. But she does want money. She wants money, but not in like a superficial way. She wants money in a way that only people in poverty want money, because of that security, because it's what's that old like adage, like it's not worrying about money, like not thinking about money as a luxury of the rich or something like that. But that's definitely Lena, whereas Elena, as I've said before, she stays focused on her academics, and she doesn't really have a long-term vision for what she wants from her life. But increasingly throughout the book, we see her reaching out. She's pulling away, and that's understandable. But it does raise that really interesting idea of, I remember reading like I can't remember who said it, but I think it was someone said it in the House of Commons once, maybe to like a select, like a hearing or something. But essentially that when we talk about aspiration for working class people, what a lot of people don't understand, if they don't have lived experience of it, is that also comes at the expense of feeling at home in the culture that you were raised in. And that is kind of what we're starting to see happening with Elena, that she's doing what she thinks she needs to do in order to improve her life. But as that happens, as she becomes sort of, I guess, more intellectualized, she becomes more academic, and she starts, I guess, seeing where she's from in a much less charitable light. Now, don't get me wrong, where she's from is flawed, and there we'll get to that. But I did think there were really interesting conversations being had in the book about class and what it means to strive upwards for social mobility, because there are always people left behind when you go up. And I think that was really interesting. There's a bit in sort of the last third of the book, let me read it to you, where Elena has essentially, through one of the teachers at her high school, has sort of engineered it and strong-armed her parents into letting Elena basically spend the summer on this island, like working for a friend of theirs. But essentially, I think they just wanted to kind of get her out of the neighborhood for the summer and have her have some different experiences. And she says when she's there, I did not feel homesick for my father, my brothers and sister, my mother, the streets of the neighborhood, the public gardens. I missed only Leela. Leela, who didn't answer my letters. So while she's on that island, she keeps writing these letters to Leela, and Leela never replies. Never replies to any of her letters. And again, I kind of was like, oh no, it's another example of like this toxic kind of slightly manipulative relationship that they seem to have. But then she eventually does get a letter from Leela, and she basically, Leela says, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't write back. I didn't want you to know how bad things were at home for me, because if I had a choice, you would stay on that island and you would never come back here. Like, I hope you stay there. Not in a like malicious way, in a like, I hope for you that you don't ever have to come back here. And that was one of the examples that Ferrante put some of them in that make you realize, okay, these girls, they do genuinely care for each other. It's like they just don't really know how to have that open and supportive relationship. Elena definitely struggles throughout the book with being sort of unable to conceptualize herself without Leela as a counterpoint. And she even says at one point, when they're sort of in their like mid-teens, that she feels like their lives always are pulling at each other. So when Leela's life is going well, Elena's is not going well, and for one of them to go up, they're like it's this balancing act where it feels like they can't both have what they want. It's always one or the other. Or if this is happening to Leela, then the opposite thing is happening to Elena. And in some ways, I think that's kind of a fair assessment of parts of their lives and how that works. But Elena is definitely a girl who is struggling, as I think a lot of people do, particularly in adolescence, but also when you're older, of kind of seeking an understanding of herself from sort of a sense of being externally validated. So whether or not it's understanding herself as a counterpoint to her best friend, or actually from the partners that she kind of like, the guys that she dates, or just anyone around her, she's constantly sort of understanding herself in this relational way, which I guess is sort of fine, because I think we're relational beings, but also she kind of goes a bit too hard on it, and like sort of neglects other aspects of her personality, I guess, when she's so focusing on whatever it is that this person is providing her, or making her feel special, or making her feel like, oh, okay, this person wants me to be this kind of girl. Maybe that's the kind of girl I am. Yeah, I think that's the kind of girl I am. Okay, this is the kind of girl I am. And then it's not, obviously. And she eventually, inevitably, kind of realizes that. I do think those different aspects of what Lena and Elena want from their lives in terms of trying to improve their circumstances definitely do play out in the relationships that they have in the book. Leela is very focused on sort of trying to make a match that is advantageous to her family and that will give her the sense of security that she needs, but crucially not at the expense completely of her sort of principles and morals, because there are other, let's just say that there's more than one suitor for Leela, because she's super desirable, right? And she does sort of definitely turn some people down who she feels are not right. So it's not like she's just looking for money. She's definitely looking for some kind of combination of money and whereas, as I said before, sort of Elena sort of moves more, she sort of slightly more casually dates, but she's quite callous in the way she dates. She sort of picks these guys up, anyone who shows her sort of any kind of interest or kindness, and then she sort of never really seems to break up with them. She just kind of starts dating someone else, and which, you know, in theory that's a fine thing to do, but I found myself feeling sorry for some of the guys because they are both quite focused on what they want and need, and I do think both of the girls struggle to consider other people's feelings. But you know, sometimes when we're teenagers, I guess we can get a little bit, you know, wrapped up in ourselves and what we need from a situation. I do think there is the violence that I spoke about before, that there's this sort of, I think I read you a little bit of a book, that idea definitely escalates slightly through the book, and it's really interesting because they move in kind of, sometimes they're in these like groups of teenagers, and all of their behavior feels really familiar as like pretty standard teenage behavior, and yet the threat or consequence of that behavior just feels like it's got like a much sharper edge. In this book, it actually reminded me at points sort of like the vibe of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. You know, that kind of like, it's teenage, but there's actually like, there's some real threat of like violence bubbling away, and not necessarily from the characters that we would expect in certain situations. And I think that was quite effective and interesting to read. There was, yeah, where am I? Yeah, so this is a bit where I won't tell you, I don't think this is massively spoilery. But it says, otherwise everyone's anger was unloaded on her. Her brother's anger because she'd abandoned him to his fate as the slave of their father, while she set off on a marriage that would make her a lady. The anger of Fernando and Nuncia because she was not nice to Solara, but rather treated him like dirt. Finally, the anger of Marcello, who, although she hadn't accepted him, felt increasingly that he was her fiancé, in fact her master, and tended to pass from silent devotion to attempts to kiss her, to suspicious questions about where she went during the day, whom she saw, if she had had other boyfriends, if she had ever even touched anyone. Since she wouldn't answer, or worse still, teased him by telling him of kisses and embraces with non-existent boyfriends, he, one evening, had whispered to her seriously, "You teased me, but you remember when you threatened me with the knife? Well, if I find out that you like someone else, remember, I won't merely threaten you, I'll kill you." So she didn't know how to get out of this situation, and she still carried her weapon just in case, but she was terrified. Yeah. I don't know if I gave a bit of too much of the plot away there. I don't know, because you don't really know who I was talking to particularly, or it's early and it's not right at the end, so it's not a massive spoiler. But yeah, there is this just sort of like threat level, as I said, throughout the book. I was hoping for like a little bit more of the kind of social, like the outside world. I think that's maybe going to come in subsequent books. It was all quite very much like right at the periphery of the book. You just get these kind of little nods through some characters of politically what else was kind of going on in Italy at the time. But I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would when I was kind of halfway through and a bit about it. It reminded me in a way of another series that I haven't finished yet, actually. Doris Lessing's Children of Violence series, which starts with Martha Quest, and the main character is Martha Quest, and they're kind of a series of 5 books that follow her life, but also are very much also bound up in the politics of what's going on behind the scenes in South Africa that series is set in. And I really liked that series, and actually there was a lot about Doris Lessing's writing that I could kind of see echoes of in this. And that's another series that I as I said, I haven't finished yet, but I kind of like pick up those books secondhand whenever I happen to see them. And I think that's a little bit how I feel about this series now, is that if I'm in a secondhand bookshop and I happen to see book 2, I'll pick it up, I'll buy it, but I have no immediate plans to like get out and like read the series, if that makes sense. But I would be really, really interested to hear your thoughts, what you think on this book, if you have read it, or if you are still interested in reading it based on kind of what I said about the last kind of third of the book, even though I struggled a little bit with it at the beginning. I think, as I said, I do think there is like emotional and character development payoff at the end of it that I wasn't necessarily expecting when I was partway through. But it is a book that is not without its flaws, in my opinion, and not without its challenges. It's definitely not a book I have like enjoyed cover to cover. But yeah, let me know if you have read it, if you're interested in reading it. And as always, if you are new here and you've enjoyed this, do subscribe to my channel, like this video. It'd be great to have you along for future exploits. And yeah, if you haven't seen any of the other books that I've read in this sort of series of books where I do the Read the World challenge, then let me know down below. I'm still looking for a recommendation for a Syrian book. So if you have one of those, I will need that for later in the year. So drop that in the comments down below as well. And thank you very much for your time, and I will see you for another video soon. Tatty bye.